VGC tournament hosted by Mount Silver, sponsored by GamerJive, and most importantly, being brought on today by Alyssa Smith, otherwise known as Temporal VGC. My name is Ryan B. Hebert, and I have the pleasure to commentate once again along Andy Anderson. Andy?
I'm doing all right, Ryan. Just setting up all the stream stuff, making sure everything's good. But we've got two very interesting players here with Nick Safranek and Henry Rich, who's from Australia. Both use some pretty unorthodox stuff, so it'll be a very interesting match here.
Absolutely. And Alto, Kyogre, Incineroar, Tapu Koko, Metagross, and Amoonguss team, while Nick Safranek is rocking something very similar to what Wolfie Glick used to win the North American International Championships, rocking Ray Ogre, Whimsicott, Celesteela, Tapu Koko, and Incineroar. Most notably, Nick Safranek is a Whimsicott fiend, hailing from the great state of Wisconsin now, Michigan, sorry, Michigan. He is a player that is one you should not mess with when it comes to anything having to do with Whimsicott. Now, I do have to say, Hobbit is rocking that Yveltal on the other side of the field, so Dark types are not affected by priority moves, and so that's a great thing for Henry. Both of these players have their bulky steel types on the field, so they're both ahead of the game when it comes to the meta, but I think the thing that's going to be really interesting here is if Yveltal really has a place against Nick Safranek.
People often refer to Yveltal as kind of like a rip shop version of Rayquaza, especially when it comes to these kind of the Kyogre
He might not be able to score any, but he can definitely redirect a powerful electric type attack. And there it is, Rage Powder coming out from the Amoonguss, Tailwind coming out from Whimsicott, and Volt Switch coming out from that Tapu Koko, going to be swapping off the field usually. You know, if I were to switch here, it's going to be Rayquaza. Maybe this weather effect weakening the Water Spout coming out from Tapu Koko.
Yeah, so we are going to see that Rayquaza take a nice little chunk of damage from that Water Spout, but not actually a whole lot, revealing potentially that it could be holding an Assault Vest, given that a lot of Rayquaza do opt for that item to make it a little bit bulkier so that it can withstand those attacks, especially from the Ice Beams, even in the Delta Stream, or sometimes even out of it if, perhaps the Kyogre isn't super specially trained. But that Tailwind's interesting because now both of these Pokemon should naturally outspeed Kyogre anyway, so Nick might not get a whole lot of mileage out of that in these next couple turns.
And what's going to be happening is Amoonguss is going to be switching out for Tapu Koko, Encore going on to that Primal Kyogre, and a Dragon Ascent unleashing into that Tapu Koko, weakening the defenses of that Rayquaza, but it will not be enough to be knocked out by a Water Spout, still at full HP and strong winds. And it looks like Tapu Koko switching out there into Amoonguss, Earth Power coming out, Endeavor coming out from Whimsicott, and Water Spout doing no damage at all.
Yeah, that was a pretty pitiful Waterfall, doing pretty much nothing to that Rayquaza and that Whimsicott. Of course, that Encore paying huge dividends, locking it into a Water Spout that is progressively getting weaker and weaker when paired with that Endeavor. So, we kind of see Nick actually getting a little bit of mileage out of those turns, even though the Tailwind may not have been super necessary in that one specific turn. Hobbit was able to waste a turn of that, of course, with switching in his Tapu Koko into the Amoonguss slot.
Mm-hmm. And what's really great, look at that. Earth Power going into that Amoonguss, the double up. The great thing about Whimsicott is that because it's a grass type, it also ignores Rage Powder from Amoonguss. And so Whimsicott is just allowed to keep going and going and going here, but this Yveltal might have something to say about that. Tailwind is now up, so both players are back to a almost neutral stance, and this Tapu Koko is looking pretty scary against a minus special defense and -1 defense on Rayquaza. But E-Speed will come out, go into the Yveltal, and Tailwind will come out again.
So we actually see that Tapu Koko go for a Sky Drop into the Whimsicott, preventing it from setting up its or doing anything else this next turn. Of course, you cannot Encore that Yveltal into Tailwind because it is a dark type. But now, Nick knows all of Hobbit's Pokemon, and contrarily, Hobbit still doesn't know what that fourth Pokemon could be for Nick. So maybe he's got a little bit of something in the back he can kind of deal with these Yveltal and this Tapu Koko.
And my goodness, can you feel the power of the Sucker Punch? Knocking out that Rayquaza, Skydrop knocking out the Whimsicott before it can get off any attacks due to its prank. And Kyogre Tapu Koko coming onto the field. Both players have an even Tailwind for 2 more turns, so Pokemon are going to be going the same speed on the field. The main question is, though, can Safranic see Yveltal on Hobbit's side of the field, or is Kyogre going to be taking the wrath of a Sucker Punch?
Yeah, and even if it doesn't take the wrath of a Sucker Punch, you do have to consider that this Tapu Koko probably knows a move that's going to do significant damage to that Kyogre. So Nick's really going to have to find a way to get rid of that Tapu Koko pretty quickly if he wants to wrap up this game. Of course, he can't risk his own Tapu Koko going down to something, because then at that point, it's just not unwinnable essentially with that other Tapu Koko, or the other Kyogre in the back.
And it looks like both players going for the safer play here, but Thunder coming out from the opposing Tapu Koko and Wild Charge being revealed on Hobbit's side of the field. That's going to be key information for later. Physical Koko. It's been a hot second. It's been a hot second since I've seen that.
Yeah, so it's pretty safe to assume that that Tapu Koko is a lot more supportive. Of course, Wild Charge being a more threatening option generally to Kyogre because of its lower defense than special defense. But yeah, that was really interesting. That was a really good kind of bait, I guess, from Nick to bait that out and get that information. And we do see the Thunder and the Water Spout get rid of the Kyogre and the Tapu Koko, and suddenly Hobbit is on the ropes here. He's staring down a Tapu Koko at full health, a Kyogre at full health. There's really not any reason, and we do see the forfeit actually. So Nick Safranic is going to take game 1.
Something about Hobbit VGC is that he's very careful about the information that he reveals. He doesn't want to reveal too quickly, and unless he has to switch out to make a safer play, redirect any electric type moves off of Yveltal. And we're going to see the Z move, Black Hole Eclipse, coming out from that Yveltal into the Kyogre slot, knocking it out.
Yeah, so that was a pretty that was a pretty good turn. Pretty good turn for Hobbit VGC. He was able to get rid of Kyogre right off the bat. Didn't really lose anything for it. About 30% on Amoonguss is all it took. So that's a huge offensive powerhouse that Safranic just lost on turn 1 of the game, and it's going to be really hard, especially to play around this Yveltal now, because Amoonguss can just constantly take away those electric type attacks, and especially without the rain, it's going to be hard to hit those thunders, even if Amoonguss is not on the field. So Hobbits was able to very commandingly put himself in a very favorable position here.
Within a single turn. Rage Powder coming out again from Amoonguss. Tailwind being used by that Whimsicott, and Gigavolt Havoc coming out knocking out the Amoonguss once and for all, and Tailwind being used on Yveltal. Hobbit saying, "No, no, my friend, we will not being outsped today." Tapu Koko coming out on Henry's side of the field as well. Both players now at an even 3-0, 3-0.
Yeah, and even though the Pokemon themselves are even currently, it's still looking a little bit more favorable for Henry, I'd say, because Whimsicott really isn't doing much of anything in this position. Of course, we do know that Safranic's Tapu Koko does carry Thunder, but it's going to be difficult for him to actually land those since he can't swap in his own Kyogre and actually get a Thunder off reliably on that Yveltal. And of course, we don't even know if Hobbit VGC has his Kyogre in the back. You'd like to assume it does, but you never know what adjustments he might have made after that game one. Because when you do lose a game one, a lot of times you rethink your strategy. Okay, maybe I don't need this Mon, maybe I don't need this other Pokemon. So who knows what else is going to play out.
We're going to see Protect coming up from Yveltal. Fake Tears going into that Koko, and Thunder landing onto Tapu Koko. But Electro Web coming out from that opposing Koko on Hobbit's side of the field, getting some speed control, lowering Whimsicott and Tapu Koko to -1 speed.
Yeah, so you can see just how bulky that Tapu Koko is. Obviously, at this point, it's safe to assume it's Assault Vest given the move choices and the bulk, but Whimsicott's just kind of stuck in that position of not being able to do anything to the Yveltal slot, and conversely, Tapu Koko's only real option is inaccurate moves. He can't even fake Tears and go for like a Volt Switch into it, unfortunately, so that's going to be tough for him to get around.
And we do see Kyogre coming out onto the field. Fake Tears Encore going into that Tapu Koko. And Thunder coming out from the opposing Tapu Koko on Nick Safranic's side of the field. Nick just unleashing damage here with Whimsicott and Tapu Koko. I mean, how the tides have turned. Andy.
Yeah, you see, Nick wasn't particularly, I guess, worried about the speed drops from Electroweb. Of course, now this is a little bit problematic because Kyogre will outspeed both of these Pokemon on Safranic's side. So he has to kind of weigh his options. What does he have in the back that could potentially, sack off something to then get Tapu Koko in at normal speed again? Because at this point, it's looking a bit rough. And if Hobbit does get rid of that Whimsicott in a double up here, then Safranic has lost his speed control option.
And it looks like Tapu Koko will be swapping out. Rayquaza will be coming out onto the field, taking that Ice Beam, just hanging on by a thread. Endeavor coming out into that opposing Yveltal. And now, back on the field, Whimsicott being at -2 speed, Rayquaza just being at a pinch of health. And knowing that there's a Sucker Punch on the field, extreme speed is going to be Rayquaza's best friend in this next turn.
Yeah, now it's kind of a mind game of, okay, do you read the Sucker Punch and go for extreme speed, or do you read a Tailwind and go for a Dragon Descent? So this next turn is going to be really huge in the tide of the game.
And there it is. Dragon Descent coming out, going into Yveltal.
Yeah, that was a pretty huge turn.
Yeah, that was a big turn. When did the Tailwind go off? Tailwind was just used, yeah. Nick saying, you know what, this is the end of my Whimsicott, but I will get one more turn of, Tailwind, and there it is, Volt Switch coming out, and Earth Power coming out from Koko, and so now both players here at 1-1. Or, no, is that...
That was actually, that was a set.
That's a clean 2-0, apologies, yeah. Good, two solid games from both of these players here, but it looks like Nick Safranic will be taking the W over Hobbit VGC, the player from Australia who has been known for his Zygarde Solgaleo team earlier this season with a small number of other players, but overall, well played by both of these players.
Yeah, you had to wonder if Safranic was maybe a little bit familiar with at least how to play around these kind of similar archetypes. Of course, Yveltal's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. People have been favoring a lot of other options that really just don't appreciate Yveltal. Xerneas is, especially with X-Ray, is just so huge right now. And even then, Yveltal doesn't do a lot to the common cores. So, maybe Safranic had kind of an idea of how to play it. But either way, it was well played by both players. But Nick definitely seemed to, even when things looked rough, he always seemed to know what the out was.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's a very bold player, too. He likes to take his risks and usually they pay off for him very well. And once again, I would say the MVP of that game had to be that Whimsicott. It just became so troubling to try to not take too much damage from that powerful endeavor. Uh, it just overall was well played by Nick, and its usage with Tapu Koko as well as Rayquaza. Overall, the matchup was really fine. I had to wonder, if the Metagross had been brought at all versus Nick's team, how could it have done? It doesn't do too much against the team for super effective damage, but could its just overall output from Tough Claws have done anything for it, Andy?
I think it depends on what that third move is, because they typically run Iron Head, Stomping Tantrum, and then Protect. But that third, usually offensive move, or sometimes people opt for Substitute. It really depends on what that is, because if it was something like a Zen Headbutt, perhaps, which is not quite common anymore, but some people still like to use those kind of tech options. He would have been able to put decent damage onto the Kyogre without something like that. I'm not sure if it would have been worth it to bring, because if he did have Substitute, he just has to worry about getting Encored into it. Of course, Tapu Koko can Gigavolt it at any point, or just drop it with a huge Thunder. Kyogre can Water Spout it, or Scald it, or Origin Pulse it, and then I believe we saw in Game 1, if I'm not mistaken, that Rayquaza had Earth Power. So there's just
Yes.
a lot of threats for it. So you have to assume that he probably didn't have a third attacking move that was beneficial in this matchup. Otherwise, it's possible he could have brought it.
Well played, Andy. Before we go off here, just an update for you all. If you're not in the Gamer Jive Mount Silver Lounge, right now, myself and all of the other commentators are looking at a live update of the pairings as they're being put in, just to go over some of the matchups that have been reported so far. Bubs versus Alex, 2-0. Giovanni VGC versus Captain Brock, 2-1. Joe UX9 versus Galactic VGC, 2-0. Irving VGC versus Colding Light, 2-0. Lexicon versus Lazak98 VGC Gaming, 2-0. Games with Davin, 2-1. Pyrion, 2-0. Danish 515 versus Seminole Zachary, 2-0. Donmar VGC versus Olmarker 12345, 2-1. Flying Falcons versus Arctic Fish, 2-1. Yoshi and Lugia versus Terrorbear, 2-0. Uber Dunga versus Grandma's Cookin', 2-1. Donald Trump VGC versus Nightfront, 2-0. Sifranic VGC versus Hobbit VGC, 2-0. Aspirin versus Waffleman, 2-0. Calvonix versus JTR 524, 2-0. Careless Lisper versus Beneathan, 2-1. And Mao versus My Cow Seat Grass, 2-0. If you're interested in looking at these live pairings as well, please head on over to GamerJive. And if you have time between rounds, head on over to the Laser Girl Lounge on GamerJive, where you can play a fun tutorial about how to actually play the game. And then we should have some staff on GamerJive right now standing by to play in the ranked or even casual games as well. So it's a fun time. But anything else to say, Andy?
I think for right now that's it. We should hopefully be coming up with round 2 pretty quickly. Seems like a lot of those sets have already ended, so hopefully we'll have some more high-paced action for you guys in just maybe next 5 or 10 minutes, hopefully.
Beautiful. Stay tuned.